Most people have, at one point or another, had an encounter with food seasoned with some variety of spicy peppers. If they're lucky, it took the form of consuming said food rather than the accidental spatter of a bit of hot sauce into one's eye. Though the heat and associated pain is fairly familiar, there is a bit more to the story than simple seasoning. After all, hot peppers exist in the wild, along with a number of other pungent plants. While they can be cultivated to emphasize certain flavors and intensities, the propensity for piquancy exists in many of the uncultivated varieties as well. In fact, it is not at all uncommon to see plants of all sorts with rather pungent substances in their tissues. Some of these are quite toxic, while others are merely spicy, at least by human standards. Indeed, we owe much of the richness of our prepared meals to various compounds that might easily be considered altogether noxious in sufficient doses. For the sake of sanity and simplicity, let us focus on the peppers for today. The genus Capsicum, to be more precise. The major compound that gives these peppers their heat is known as capsaicin, named after the genus. So let us take a closer look into this particular group of plants and their associated biochemistry and find out just what the point of all of this heat might be. The genus Capsicum consists of over 20 recognized species, though the precise number may vary depending upon who you ask. Out of these, 5 are cultivated to significant degrees. Even among different cultivars of these species, there is considerable variation to be found in shape, color, taste, and heat level. The various species are originally native to northern South America and the southwestern region of North America. Capsicum annuum is likely to be the most familiar species overall. Within this species, there are over 200 cultivars. Depending upon the specific variety and the degree of ripening before harvest, one might easily find chili peppers, cayenne peppers, jalapeno peppers, or bell peppers. Another species, Capsicum chinense, includes the habanero pepper among its cultivars. I should note that this species is native to the New World, and as such, the species name is something of a misnomer. While such peppers have been cultivated and used for seasoning in China for hundreds of years now, it is not their land of origin. As an aside, even the name pepper is somewhat confusing, as it is a quite different sort of plant that produces the peppercorns that can be ground up to make black pepper and similar spices. This species, Piperine nigrum, is in a completely different family to the various capsicum species. The heat of these spices is derived from piperine rather than capsaicin. While the two compounds have somewhat similar chemical structures, they are nevertheless quite distinct from one another. Returning to the capsicum peppers, the purpose of their distinct piquancy can be elucidated somewhat by the molecular mechanisms of capsaicin. Or, to put it another way, we can figure out why these peppers are hot by looking at the chemistry of how the sensation of heat is generated. Every substance that has a flavor when tasted interacts in some way with one or more chemical receptor proteins found on sensory cells. The same goes for scent, incidentally. The location and delivery mechanisms are different, but in the end it is a substance interacting with a receptor. The receptor that capsaicin interacts with is a protein known as the capsaicin receptor. That is a bit tautological, but this receptor does have a few other names. Vanilloid Receptor 1, for example. This name is due to its sensitivity to certain vanilloids. You might ask what vanilloids are. These are compounds that have a specific chemical structure somewhere within their overall structure. This functional group is known as a vanillyl group. It gets this name from vanillin, a molecule that is basically this group with just a few atoms added on. The flavor of vanilla is largely due to vanillin and related compounds. In any case, capsaicin contains a vanillyl group, which makes it a vanilloid, and the capsaicin receptor reacts to this particular vanilloid. Just to make things all the more fun, this receptor is also known as TRPV1, which is short for Transient Receptor Potential Cation Channel Subfamily V Member 1. As with many receptor proteins, TRPV1 is located in the cell membrane. Its primary function is in the detection of heat, vital to regulating body temperature. When activated, it provides a sensation of heat and pain. A related protein, TRPA1, also functions in the sensation of pain, cold, and itching. Another name for this receptor is the wasabi receptor. In any case, when capsaicin binds to TRPV1, aka the capsaicin receptor, it activates the receptor, generating a sense of heat and pain beyond a certain point. Basically, this molecule effectively hacks into the receptor that is normally supposed to be noticing heat or acidity. The burn of a hot pepper is literally an illusion. Granted, it is an extremely persuasive illusion. I should note that even illusions are not entirely without their dangers. An excess of capsaicin will lead to a remarkably strong neurological response, sufficient to alter the tissues in less than optimal ways for a time. After all, the body is utterly convinced that it is on fire. Countermeasures will inevitably be taken. Such countermeasures may become counterproductive when they are not actually needed. Different people have different sensitivities to capsaicin due to a combination of genetics and exposure. A slightly different version of the receptor may yield slightly different levels of response. A slight difference in the connected nervous system will also alter how the illusory heat is perceived and processed. Frequent contact with capsaicin tends to reduce sensitivity over time as well. Now here is the problem with peppers. All flowering plants produce fruits, though only certain types are commonly recognized as fruits by most people. For example, the nutshell on a nut is in fact a form of fruit surrounding the seed. The more conventional fruits, by human standards, are largely considered as fleshy fruits of one sort or another. Regardless of the details, the purpose of a typical fruit is some combination of protecting the plant's seeds and aiding in their dispersal. Most of the fleshy fruits are meant to be consumed by animals as a means of dispersing the plant's seeds. They tend to develop enticing colors and pleasant flavors when ripe, or at least flavors that are pleasant to the animal they are trying to attract. Though it is costly to build all that tissue for an animal to consume, there is the benefit of a bit of natural fertilizer being inevitably deposited along with the seeds. One can reasonably assume that a fleshy fruit implies the presence of some form of local frugivore. So having a fruit that gives you the illusion of being on fire when you taste it might seem just a little counterproductive. Human madness aside, there aren't many creatures that would seek this out for consumption. As it turns out, this propensity for piquancy is an elegant form of selectivity. Within the environment of typical capsicum plants, there are a fair variety of animals. Potential consumers of the fruits include many species of bird and mammal. If the fruit were to be consumed by a bird, the seeds would pass through the digestive system largely intact. As birds fly, these seeds could travel quite far, with the usual complementary fertilizer upon delivery. All around, this is a rather good deal for the next generation of the local capsicum. Alas, the story is a bit different if a mammal consumes the fruit. Unlike birds, mammals tend to have molars. After a bit of chewing, the seeds end up crushed and rendered effectively non-functional. Now you might ask, what about bird gizzards? Apparently, the gizzard grinding isn't enough to break the pepper seeds, whereas a thorough chewing is. So a fruit eaten by a mammal is effectively wasted in these plants. The diner has gotten a meal without actually dropping off any suitable seeds in the local landscape. Now this is where things get particularly interesting. As with humans, all mammal species have their own versions of TRPV1. These are all fairly similar, as a receptor with such a vital function tends to be pretty highly conserved. So capsaicin will bind with just about any mammalian TRPV1 receptor. Birds also have their version of this receptor, but just as birds are different from mammals, their receptors are structurally distinct as well. In other words, a mammal's TRPV1 is more different from a bird's TRPV1 than it is from any other mammal's TRPV1. As some of you have no doubt guessed by now, capsaicin does not bind with the bird versions of this receptor. If there is no binding, there is no activation. If there is no activation, there is no illusion of heat. A sparrow or a blue jay could happily snack on a bit of Carolina Reaper without being perturbed in the slightest. So it would appear that the purpose of the hot pepper is a very selective defense. A bird is drawn in by the bright color and feeds on the fruit without issue. A mammal that would destroy the plant's seeds is treated to a vivid illusion of being on fire without actually injuring it directly. In a sense, this might be almost considered to be a mercy. There are a great many plants that will simply poison potential diners to keep them away. Here, at least, the unfortunate creature survives its burning ordeal and generally knows not to bother that particular pepper plant in the future. Of course, then the humans showed up. Apparently, we're kind of insane as a species. For some of us at least, the pain and heat of capsaicin is sought out and cultivated, rather than being avoided. Not that this is really any great issue for the peppers. By catching the interest of humans, they have found their way to virtually every part of the world in their cultivation. So even if their specific defense isn't exactly working as intended, it has still worked out to their advantage. Thank you for listening. I hope you have enjoyed this brief glimpse into the more unusual side of the natural world. If you wish to know more, here are a few things that might be worth looking into. If you found this enjoyable, feel free to leave a like. If you think others would enjoy this content, by all means, share. If you have something to say or ask about, honest comments are always welcome. If you wish to see more from this channel, a subscription would be most helpful. Until next time.